Hi, it's a pleasure to be here today to talk to you about observations in qualitative health research. My name is Dr. Elise Paradis. I hold a Canada Research Chair in Collaborative Healthcare Practice, and you can find me on Twitter at EPQC. So today, what are we going to do? First, we're going to discuss why we should be conducting observational research. Then we'll turn to the types of observation, and we'll close by a conversation about field notes. We'll also be practicing our observational skills today, so please take a piece of paper and pen and be ready to write. So let's get started. So why would we observe healthcare? I can think of four main reasons. The first one is to describe what is going on and how things are done in a specific setting. So if you're interested in geriatric care, for instance, you might want to look at how it is provided so that your insights are maximized. Second, you could flesh out the context of what participants are telling you through other forms of data collection. So say you're doing an interview study with ICU clinicians. Well, they might be sharing something with you that does not resonate. By following them around the ICU and looking at how they practice, you might get a better sense for what they are telling you. Third, you can help make things strange for people in the setting that you're observing, because some things they might be taking for granted. So for instance, well, you know that humans are creatures of habit, and therefore people over time stop understanding why and how they do things. By observing them in practice, you can make these things strange and feed them back to them so that they have a better chance at revisiting processes and practices. The fourth reason would be to contrast what people do with what people say they do, and that's a big part of my own research program. In areas such as ethics or vague behaviors like collaborating, it's very difficult for people to accurately represent what they do. So by observing them, you can actually make sense of the gap between what people say and what people do in healthcare delivery. So I'm simplifying here, but there are two main types of observations: realist and critical. Realist observations aim to produce an objective account of the situation, of what is truly out there for the observer to see. It is generally a third-person narrative about others and what they do, and it is often anchored in a post-positivist epistemology and therefore is the core of most qualitative health research. Critical observations, in contrast, are often conducted for politically motivated researchers, or by politically motivated researchers such as feminists and other social justice-oriented researchers. It aims to give voice to participants and their experiences and to challenge the status quo, improve lives, or change the balance of power among different stakeholders. It might also be written in the first person, which provides a clear, strong-voiced personal account of things that have been observed. When talking about high-quality observations, we might also talk about what high-quality observations are not, and that's really useful if you're a beginner. So for instance, high-quality observations are not structured observations of what, who, and when. If you know precisely what you are interested in and can fit it neatly into a table, you are not engaged in the co-construction of knowledge that is fundamental to most qualitative approaches. They're also not mere recordings of what people say. So think for a moment, if you were really interested in what people say, wouldn't it be better to just have a microphone, record all of it, and transcribe and analyze it? In contrast, if you are doing observations, you must flesh out what you see. You try to do some thick description in the sense meant by Clifford Geertz, and you can use all your senses to bring your audience with you to the observations. And finally, high-quality observations are not atheoretical observations. Some sort of theory underpins most high-quality observational research. And here by theory, I don't mean necessarily a grand theory of things, but important concepts, those sensitizing concepts that help structure your observations, or other more specific theories like Bourdieu's theory of practice or symbolic interactionism. These theories and frameworks will help you answer your research question more accurately and also inscribe you within an intellectual tradition that has a lot to offer. Now let's change gears a bit and take 3 minutes to write some observational notes. So after this, I will flip to a photo, and I invite you to take 3 minutes to write what you see. If you need more, take more, and then get back to me once you know what you've seen, and we'll debrief together. So welcome back. What did you see? Were your observations realist or were they critical? What kinds of concepts did you use to organize your notes? What did you pay attention to? Now think for yourself. What kind of questions would you have liked to ask the people in this photo? If you're anything like the people I have taught before using this photo, you might have recognized that this is some sort of healthcare setting, although you might not have precisely understood what this was. You would have maybe thought that the women looked sad. You may or may not have noticed a cross in the background. And if you have a midwifery or OBGYN background, you might have seen those blue cloths hanging from the ceiling as birthing cloths, so those cloths that women can hang on to give birth while squatting. If you instead have lived in the South or traveled in the South, you might have recognized them as mosquito nets to protect the inhabitants of the beds at night. Now take a step back. How did your previous experiences influence what you saw? Did you realize that this was a maternity ward in a hospital? Did you know that in certain cultures it is normal to avoid looking at the photographer, and thus that it is not necessarily a sign of distress that the women are not looking directly at the camera? I chose to analyze this photo with you because it points to an important limitations of observations. Your own background has really important consequences for what you will see, and if you are doing research within a critical tradition in particular, you have to be really wary of those and understand what they are. Now let's turn to the third and final portion of our session today. So, writing field notes. Writing field notes is a craft, it is not a science, and everyone will have a different style, a different focus, a different area of interest. It is only by writing that you'll get better at writing. So if you're not interested in writing, or if your skills are limited, get writing right now. Since field notes are basically the data of observational research, they are really an essential part of your fieldwork, and they're necessary to relate accurately what you saw, trigger your memory, provide rich or thick descriptions, all of which will be necessary if you are to publish later. So a key distinction when it comes to writing high-quality field notes is the difference between thin and thick descriptions. Thin descriptions say what happened, but in very terse or shallow terms. So for instance, if you are observing a healthcare team, you might say that the team has moved into the patient's room. Well, that's not really interesting for social research overall. What is more interesting is if you are able to use these 9 dimensions of social life to flesh out what is really happening. So who were these people who walked in? Who was the patient? What was the issue? What were the people saying? Who was left behind? Who took the lead in first talking to the patient or getting the intubation happening? All of these details are really important because they flesh out the nature of social life and they make it unique. It is really important in observational research that you do take this time to write it up and make it thick so that the person is brought with you to your setting of research. So thinking about publication or your chapters for your dissertation, you have to balance details with the big picture of what was happening when you observed it. You also have to write evocatively. So you, again, should be bringing people with you on this journey of observation. And if you are able to bring them in through beautiful writing, you have a much better chance at making your point across. When you are in the field, what you immediately write down are not field notes. What you are putting down on paper are what Fritz, Emerson, and Shaw call instead jottings. So when I take down jottings, I make sure to note who was there and who they were, and make sure to distinguish my own writing and my own observations from what people have told me using quotes and other symbols. I always try to write my field notes as soon as possible after I have been in the field because I don't want my memory to let me play tricks on me. I also use memos, both analytic and methodological, because they are the notes to myself that will then form the backbone of my future papers. Now that we know all of this, we'll get ramped up for our second round of observations. And we'll use part of the framework developed by Spradley in 1980 about the 9 dimensions of social life. You're not expected to know all the 9 of them for now. You can see them on the slide here. But what we'll do for this second observation is instead to focus on space, actors, and acts. So once again, take out your pen and paper, and I will give you some time, I will take some time to look at the following photo, and we'll get back together later. So, welcome back. What did you see? Was the observation guide helpful? Observation guides have both strengths and limitations in that they really focus your attention on specific aspects of what is happening, but they also make you not see certain other things. Any way of seeing is a way of not seeing. So focusing on our guide, so who were the actors that you focused on? What acts were they engaged in? What did you think about the distribution of space in this photo? Let's switch our emphasis now. Think of how you would turn these jottings that you just made into field notes. How would you describe this scene for someone who wasn't there? Could you use the 9 dimensions of social life to help you write an important event such as this one? What I personally see in this picture is a set of medical students and residents looking at a chest x-ray, a terrible chest x-ray actually. I also see a patient in the background surrounded by a loved one and a nurse. I see that the residents and physicians are not co-located with the patient whose x-ray they're looking at. I see them really focused on this, and I see their backs, their white coats, as blocking the view of the observer. Here it's the photographer, but it could be you, or it could be another healthcare professionals. Did you notice the distressed patient at the back? How did that make you feel? Whom did you think was around her? And at another analytic level, were you made uncomfortable by the photo? Well, I was when I first saw it and when I first witnessed such dynamics in 2012 when I was observing. And several years later, it still unsettles me. So to make sense of this discomfort, I want us to add another tool to our toolbox of observational approaches. And this is the distinction between emic and etic data. Emic data is the information supplied by the participants in your observational study. Emic often refers to first-order concepts such as local languages, concepts and expressions used by members of a culture-sharing group. In contrast, etic data is information representing you as the researcher's interpretation of the participants' perspectives. It refers to second-order concepts or theories that help you bridge your setting for observation with other similar settings. So when I first visited the ICU in 2012 and I saw some scenes like that, I grew really uncomfortable with physicians' apparent lack of interest in patients' distress. It is only later on when I started asking questions and I developed my relationship with ICU physicians that I realized that we had an emic-etic problem. For them, their emic perspective, patient care included diagnostics, care plan, and discharge. And for me, given my personal experiences, given what I had read, patient care really meant hands-on care. It meant co-located care. It meant caring for and with a patient, right? So initially, my discomfort was strong, but then I thought, what is the opportunity in this? You know, reflecting back this knowledge to the physicians, making strange their own practice can have a lasting impact on healthcare delivery. So we have to end now. I hope that this short video helped pique your interest in observational methods, their strengths and limitations, and that you'll get set on a path to learn more. I look forward to hearing from you on Twitter if you want to find me there. And I hope we can continue this conversation further. Thank you very much.